I'm Allison Parker, 32 years old, and when I walked into that courtroom, my stomach was in knots. There they sat my mother, Catherine, with that smug smile, my brother James looking bored on his phone. 6 months after Dad's death, they thought this inheritance battle was over. Mom caught my eye and smirked. They were so confident they had won. But neither of them noticed my attorney's briefcase, or the sealed envelope inside that would change everything. They had no idea what was coming. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I finally got justice against the people who should have loved me most. I'd always been the black sheep of the Parker family. While my younger brother James stayed close to home and worked in Dad's business, I moved 3 states away to build my own career as a financial analyst. I worked hard to get where I am, top MBA program, 80-hour work weeks, and a reputation for spotting financial discrepancies others missed. I was proud of what I'd accomplished on my own, but it also created distance between me and my family, especially my mother. Dad was different. Robert Parker built his medical supply company from nothing into a regional powerhouse. He worked tirelessly, but always made time to call me twice a week, fly out for my graduations, and tell me how proud he was of my independence. "You're just like me, Allie," he'd say. "Building something of your own." My mother, Catherine, never approved of my choices. A former beauty queen who married into money, she expected me to follow her path. Marry well, attend charity galas, and most importantly, stay close to home where she could influence my life. Instead, I moved away and built a career. She took it as rejection and never let me forget it. Then there was James. 3 years younger than me, he'd been spoiled from day one. While I worked summer jobs, he got a new car for his 16th birthday. When I paid my way through undergrad with scholarships and part-time work, James partied through college on Dad's dime. He eventually dropped out and reluctantly joined Dad's business, where he held a VP title but rarely showed up. I later learned he'd developed a cocaine habit in college that drained tens of thousands from Dad's accounts before he finally got clean. Dad's death 6 months ago came as a shock. At 68, he was still healthy, playing tennis weekly and running his company. A sudden stroke took him within days. I flew home immediately, devastated and struggling to process the loss of my biggest supporter. The first sign something was wrong came during the funeral preparations. Mom excluded me from decisions, then seated me in the second row while she and James took center stage. At the reception, I overheard family friends whispering about poor Allison and how disappointed Dad had been in me. None of it made sense. The real bomb dropped during the will reading. Dad's estate was substantial, the business worth about $20 million plus another $10 million in properties and investments. The previous will I'd known about split things fairly, the business to James, with oversight provisions, our childhood home to Mom, and several investment accounts and properties divided between us. I would have received about $7 million. But this new will, supposedly signed just 2 weeks before Dad died, changed everything. Now James got the business free and clear. Mom received nearly all the properties and investment accounts, and I was left with a single property, Dad's fishing cabin, worth maybe $300,000, and a token cash inheritance of $50,000. When I expressed shock, the lawyer simply said, "These were your father's wishes, Miss Parker." But I knew better. Dad's signature looked wrong, more shaky than I'd ever seen it. And why would he suddenly cut me out after always treating us equally? That night, I visited Dad's office in their home, while Mom hosted post-funeral visitors. In his desk drawer, I found a personal letter he'd been writing to me, never finished. "Allie, I'm concerned about some things happening here. James has been..." That was where it ended. But it was enough. The next day, I contacted Melissa Johnson, a tough attorney specializing in contested wills. Her retainer nearly emptied my savings account, but after reviewing my case, her eyes narrowed. "Something's not right here, Allison. That signature is questionable at best. And the timing, a complete revision 2 weeks before death, with no prior indication, we have grounds to challenge." "What are our chances?" I asked. "Honestly, tough. These cases are expensive, and family members change their minds all the time. But if you're right about this, we'll find the evidence." I took a deep breath and signed the retainer agreement. I wasn't fighting for the money, though I could certainly use it. I was fighting because something had happened to my father in his final days, and I needed to know the truth. With Melissa's guidance, we began building our case. The first step was gathering every document I could access related to Dad's business and personal affairs. This proved immediately difficult. Mom had already cleared out his home office, claiming she needed to organize his papers. When I asked to see them, she claimed they were at the accountant's office. I started with what I could access. I still had keys to Dad's fishing cabin, a small 2-bedroom retreat on Lake Champlain where he'd taught me to fish as a child. James had never shown interest in the outdoors, making it our place. The cabin was modest compared to our family's other properties, which explained why Mom had let me have it in the will. Inside, I found a filing cabinet with some old tax documents and property records. Nothing recent or helpful, but I did discover a hidden compartment under a floorboard in the main bedroom empty, except for a scrap of paper with what looked like account numbers and initials. I photographed it and sent it to Melissa. Next, I visited Dad's bank. As an authorized user on one of his smaller accounts used for birthday gifts and emergency funds, I requested the statements for the past year. The bank manager was hesitant until I mentioned potential fraud investigation, which got me 3 months of records. The statements showed something odd: weekly cash withdrawals of exactly $5,000 in the months before Dad's death. Dad never used cash for anything over $20. This wasn't his pattern. When I brought this information to Melissa, she added it to our growing file of inconsistencies. "We need to find out who was accessing those accounts," she said. "And we need the medical records from your father's final weeks." Armed with questions, I confronted my mother at her mansion in Greenwich. The house where I grew up felt foreign now, with Catherine already redecorating, removing Dad's hunting trophies, and replacing them with abstract art he would have hated. "This is ridiculous," Catherine said when I asked about the will. She sat perfectly poised in her cream-colored living room, not a hair out of place, despite it being barely 9 in the morning. "Your father was disappointed in how distant you'd become. You hardly called, rarely visited." "That's not true," I said, heat rising in my face. "We talked twice a week every week. He visited me in Chicago quarterly." She waved a dismissive hand. "Playing at being father-daughter while you rejected the family business, rejected our values." It hurt him deeply. So deeply he decided to cut me out completely, after always telling me how proud he was of my independence. "People say things they don't mean, darling," she said with a cold smile. "Robert was too soft to tell you how he really felt. But near the end, he wanted to set things right." James sauntered in, then surprisingly alert for mid-morning given his usual habits. "Just drop it, Allie," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Dad changed his mind. It happens." "Did you know about these changes before he died?" I asked directly. James and Mom exchanged a quick glance. "He mentioned wanting to update some things," James said carefully. "But I wasn't involved in the details." As I left, James followed me to my car. His tone changed once we were alone. "Look, this isn't going to go anywhere. You're burning money on legal fees for nothing. Just accept what you got and move on." "Is that a threat, James?" "It's advice. From someone who knows exactly what Dad wanted." His eyes so similar to mine, and Dad's held a warning I couldn't quite interpret. The obstacles continued mounting. When I reached out to family friends, people who'd known us for decades, they were suddenly unavailable or uncomfortably vague. One family friend, Henry Wilson, Dad's tennis partner for 20 years, finally told me the truth over coffee. "Your mother's been telling everyone you abandoned your father when he first got sick," he admitted. "Said you were too busy with your career to visit, even when they told you it was serious. People believe her, Allison. I wasn't sure myself until you called." "That's completely false," I said, stunned. "Dad never showed any symptoms until that final stroke. There was no getting sick period." Henry looked confused. "That's not what Catherine said. She told everyone Robert had been having small strokes for months, that the doctors had warned them the big one was coming. This was the first I'd heard of any previous medical issues." I immediately called Dad's longtime physician, Dr. Brennan, but his receptionist informed me patient records were confidential even for family. I would need a court order. Our first court appearance went terribly. We filed a motion for discovery, requesting access to Dad's medical records, business documents, and the attorney's notes from the will preparation. The judge, an older man who knew my mother socially, seemed skeptical from the start. "This appears to be a case of a daughter unhappy with her inheritance," he remarked, peering over his glasses at me. "What evidence do you have of undue influence or fraud beyond your personal feelings?" Melissa presented our concerns about the signature, the timing, and the dramatic change without apparent cause. She requested a handwriting expert be allowed to examine the will. "Denied," the judge said flatly. "The signature was witnessed by the attorney and notarized. Without substantial evidence of wrongdoing, I cannot authorize a fishing expedition through the deceased's papers." He did, however, grant limited access to Dad's medical records from his final hospitalization, though not the months preceding it. Back at my hotel room that night, I broke down completely. I'd taken an unpaid leave from my job to pursue this case, was burning through savings on legal and investigation fees, and seemed to be getting nowhere. The next morning, another blow when Melissa sent a paralegal to examine Dad's safe deposit box, where I hoped the original will might be stored. They discovered it had been emptied 3 days after his death. The bank confirmed Catherine and James had accessed it together. "We need more," Melissa admitted when I called her in tears. "We have suspicions, but no smoking gun. If we're going to continue, we need to dig deeper into what was happening in your father's life those final months." After our setback in court, Melissa suggested we hire a private investigator to help gather evidence we couldn't legally access. She introduced me to Rachel Bennett, a former insurance fraud investigator who specialized in financial cases. "Family disputes like this often leave paper trails," Rachel explained during our first meeting. "People get careless, especially when they think they've won." Rachel's first discovery came quickly and chilled me to the bone. While looking into Dad's final days, she obtained pharmacy records showing changes in his medication regimen. For years, Dad had taken a standard blood pressure medication with no issues. 2 months before his death, his prescription changed to a different drug at a much higher dosage than typically prescribed. "This dosage would cause severe drops in blood pressure," Rachel explained. "Combined with certain foods or alcohol, it could trigger exactly the kind of stroke that killed him." "Are you saying someone deliberately caused his stroke?" I asked, horrified. "I'm saying the medication change is suspicious enough to warrant looking into who authorized it and why." Rachel's investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Mom had been meeting privately with Dad's new doctor, Dr. Patel, who had taken over when Dr. Brennan went on sabbatical 3 months before Dad's death. These meetings weren't during Dad's appointments, but separate consultations. Meanwhile, I noticed James following me, first at my hotel, then when I visited Dad's office building to speak with his former secretary. One evening, I spotted him parked across from the restaurant where I was meeting Melissa. When confronted, he claimed coincidence, but a few days later, Rachel confirmed he'd hired someone to photograph my movements around town. The psychological warfare escalated. Anonymous notes began appearing under my hotel room door on my windshield, once even delivered with my room service order. All contained variations of the same message. "Go back to Chicago. You won't win this." The betrayal expanded beyond my immediate family. My college friend Samantha, who lived in the area, suddenly canceled plans with flimsy excuses. When I finally cornered her at her workplace, she admitted the truth. "Your mom came to see me," she confessed, looking ashamed. "She showed me texts from your dad saying he was heartbroken about your relationship. Said you were dragging his name through the mud with false accusations because you were greedy." "Sam, those texts can't be real. Dad and I were fine." She had screenshots, Allie. And then she mentioned how my husband's construction company might be perfect for the renovations she's planning for the family properties. Contracts worth millions. Catherine was systematically isolating me, cutting off potential allies and witnesses. But Rachel's investigation was uncovering financial motives that added another dimension to the case. "Your mother has serious gambling debts," she reported, sliding photos across the table showing Catherine at high-stakes poker tables at Foxwoods Casino. "She's lost over $200,000 in the past year alone." Another piece clicked into place. The cash withdrawals from Dad's accounts, $5,000 weekly, just under the reporting threshold for banks, could have been funding Mom's gambling habit. But Dad would never have approved that level of gambling. Meanwhile, James had made several major purchases since Dad's death: a new Porsche, a boat, and put a down payment on a luxury condo in Manhattan, all while claiming the business was struggling and required his full attention. The betrayal cut deepest during a family gathering for my cousin's wedding. I attended despite my ongoing legal battle, not wanting to lose connection with the extended family. Catherine orchestrated a public humiliation, loudly discussing how disappointed Dad had been in my abandonment and money grabbing after his death. Relatives who'd known me my entire life looked at me with doubt and pity. I left the reception early, sitting in my rental car sobbing. For the first time, I seriously considered dropping the case. Maybe the money wasn't worth this pain, this systematic destruction of my family relationships and reputation. That night, I drafted an email to Melissa suggesting we discuss settlement options. But before I could send it, my phone rang an unknown local number. Allison. This is Barbara Davis, your father's secretary for the last 15 years. I remembered Barbara, a petite, efficient woman who'd always had candy in her desk drawer for me when I visited Dad's office as a child. I've been wanting to call you, she said, voice low. There are things you should know about your father's final weeks. Things I couldn't say while still employed there. You left the company. Your brother fired me last week. After 15 years, no warning, no real explanation. Can we meet? That call changed everything. Barbara became the first crack in Catherine and James's carefully constructed narrative and revealed that the betrayal went deeper than I had imagined. I met Barbara the next morning at a small coffee shop, far from my family's usual haunts. She looked different from the impeccably dressed secretary. I remembered more tired hair, gone completely gray, but her eyes still sharp. Your father knew something was wrong, she said after we'd settled with our coffee. In those final weeks, he became increasingly paranoid, asking me to log who entered his office, keeping documents in my desk, instead of his changing passwords weekly. Did he say what he was worried about? I asked. Not directly, but it started after he discovered financial discrepancies in the company books, areas James was supposedly overseeing. She hesitated. Your father had been protecting James for years, covering his mistakes, making excuses for his absences. But something changed. He said it was too much this time. Barbara explained that Dad had planned to restructure the company leadership and the family estate. He contacted his longtime attorney, Jeffrey Adams, about updating his will, but then suddenly switched to this new lawyer I'd never heard of. When I asked about it, he seemed confused, said Catherine had arranged it all. Jeffrey Adams. I recognized the name. He'd handled our family's legal affairs for decades. Why would Dad suddenly change attorneys for something as important as his will? With Barbara's help, I located Jeffrey at his office in downtown Greenwich. A distinguished man in his 60s, he greeted me warmly but cautiously. I wondered if you might contact me, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I've been following your case in the legal notices. Why didn't you reach out? I asked. Attorney-client privilege, he said simply. Even after death, I cannot disclose communications without permission or a court order. But I can answer direct questions about my role or lack thereof. Jeffrey confirmed he'd been abruptly dismissed from handling Dad's will revision. Your father called to schedule a meeting about updating his estate plan. Before we could meet, I received a letter terminating our professional relationship for all personal matters. The signature appeared to be his, but the letter itself. He paused. Let's just say, after 30 years working together, it didn't sound like Robert's voice. This conversation led to meeting Dad's longtime physician, Dr. Brennan, who had returned from sabbatical after Dad's death. Initially hesitant due to confidentiality, he became more forthcoming when I shared my concerns about the medication changes. Those dosages are concerning, he admitted, reviewing the records we'd obtained. I would never have prescribed that combination for your father's condition. And these notes about his cognitive state, they don't match the man I knew for 20 years. Robert was sharp as a tack. The pieces were forming a disturbing pattern. Dad's behavior had changed dramatically in his final months, coinciding with medication changes, Catherine's increased involvement in his healthcare, and James taking more control at the office. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The hospital where Dad died had surveillance footage of the corridors outside his room. Rachel obtained it through a contact in security. The footage showed Catherine meeting privately with Dr. Patel multiple times daily, and most disturbing, James appearing to add something to Dad's fore when the nurses were absent. Meanwhile, I made my own discovery while staying at the fishing cabin. In a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace, I found a small notebook in Dad's handwriting. Much of it was in a personal shorthand I couldn't fully decipher, but it clearly documented meetings, phone calls, and what appeared to be financial figures with James and Catherine's initials beside them. The final entry dated just 3 days before his stroke read confrontation necessary. JRP stole $2. 4M. CP knows. My support network grew. Samantha returned as an ally after her husband lost the renovation contracts to a competitor, Catherine's promises proving empty. I should have trusted you, Samantha said. I'm sorry I let money cloud my judgment. Thomas Wilson, Dad's business partner in their early years, who had remained on the board, reached out after hearing rumors about my investigation. Robert called me 2 weeks before he died. Thomas told me he was planning to remove James from the company, said there were criminal concerns he needed to address. We were supposed to meet the day after he had his stroke. Thomas offered financial backing for my legal battle. Robert was like a brother to me, he said. If something untoward happened, I want the truth as much as you do. With this growing team of allies and mounting evidence, we developed a comprehensive strategy. Melissa filed motions to depose Dr. Patel, subpoena complete medical records, and gain access to the company financial documents James had been keeping locked away. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt a shift in momentum. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Catherine called one evening, her voice honey-sweet in a way that had always meant trouble when I was growing up. Darling, this legal nastiness has gone on too long, she said. Perhaps we could discuss a more equitable arrangement. Family shouldn't fight like this. I recognized the tone she was worried, and that gave me hope. Catherine's concern quickly morphed into a counterattack more vicious than anything I'd anticipated. 3 days after her conciliatory phone call, I was served with papers. Catherine had filed a countersuit claiming I was mentally unstable and engaged in a delusional campaign to slander deceased father's memory. The filing included affidavits from 3 witnesses claiming I had exhibited erratic behavior at the funeral, made wild accusations, and even threatened Catherine. One statement came from our housekeeper of 20 years, who claimed she'd overheard me threatening to destroy the family if I didn't get what I deserved. The words were fabricated, but the signature was real. Melissa was blunt when I called her in panic. This is a nuclear option, Allison. They're trying to have you declared incompetent to handle your own affairs, which would automatically disqualify your claims about the will. The attack expanded beyond the courtroom. Anonymous calls were made to my employer in Chicago, suggesting I was unstable and involved in unsavory legal issues. My apartment manager called to tell me complaints had been filed about disturbances while I wasn't even in the state. Most alarming, my professional license as a financial analyst came under review based on anonymous accusations of ethical violations. The coordinated assault was sophisticated and comprehensive, exactly the kind of thorough destruction Catherine had always excelled at when someone crossed her. The lowest blow came when I returned to my hotel room one evening to find the door ajar. Inside the room had been methodically searched, my laptop missing, and files scattered. The hotel security footage showed a cleaning cart blocking the camera view of my door during the time frame of the break-in, too convenient to be coincidence. Most critically, Dad's notebook from the cabin was gone, along with the files Barbara had given me, documenting the timeline of Dad's strange behavior. The police filed a report but made it clear they considered it a routine hotel theft, not a targeted attack. Meanwhile, Melissa faced her own pressures. The prestigious law firm representing Catherine and James Harrington Wells and Associates approached Melissa's small firm with veiled threats about professional consequences for pursuing a frivolous and harmful case against respected community members. They've offered to make some problems go away for our other clients if I drop your case, Melissa admitted, looking uncomfortable. I'm not going to, but you should know what we're up against. These people have connections throughout the state legal system. Those connections became painfully obvious when a prominent local newspaper ran a feature story about inheritance disputes, tearing families apart using my case as the central example. The article portrayed me as a resentful daughter who'd abandoned her family, then returned demanding money when her father died. It quoted family friends describing how heartbroken Dad had been by my absence during his long illness. The article never mentioned there had been no long illness, that the will was changed just before his death, or any of the suspicious circumstances we'd uncovered. When Melissa contacted the reporter requesting corrections, she discovered the journalist was married to a partner at Harrington Wells and Associates. The legal setbacks continued. Our motion to compel discovery of the company financial records was denied. Our request for expanded medical records met similar resistance. Most devastating, the judge granted Catherine's motion for a psychological evaluation to determine if I was mentally competent to pursue the case. This is a delay tactic, Melissa explained. Even if the evaluation comes back completely in your favor, which it will, they'll have bought themselves another 3 months while draining your resources. That evening in my hotel room with my savings nearly depleted, my professional reputation under attack, and key evidence stolen, I hit my lowest point. I called Melissa. "Maybe we should discuss settlement terms," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't keep fighting like this. They have more resources, more connections. I'm losing everything." There was silence on the line, then Melissa's voice, uncharacteristically gentle. "Allison, that's exactly what they want for you to give up, just when we're making progress." "What progress?" "We keep losing motions, evidence keeps disappearing, and now I have to defend my sanity." "The fact that they're fighting this hard means we're onto something big," she said. "People don't burn these kinds of resources unless they're protecting something valuable or hiding something dangerous." I wasn't convinced. After we hung up, I lay on the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about walking away. I could return to Chicago, try to rebuild my career, and accept that I'd never know the full truth about Dad's death or the betrayal by my family. Sleep eventually came, and with it a dream of Dad sitting at his desk pointing urgently at his filing cabinet. I woke up at 3 a.m. with a strange sense of clarity. Walking away wasn't an option. Whatever the cost, I needed to see this through for Dad and for myself. The turning point came unexpectedly. The day after my moment of doubt, Melissa called with news. "We found a procedural error in their filings," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "The psychological evaluation motion wasn't properly noticed. We have grounds to dismiss it and buy time." This small victory energized our efforts. Melissa recommended bringing in specialized help Roger Dawson, a retired detective, who now consulted on complex financial crimes. "Family fraud cases are my specialty," Roger explained during our first meeting. He was older than I expected, in his 60s, with a limp from an old injury, but his mind was razor sharp. 90% of these cases have a money trail. People smart enough to commit sophisticated fraud are usually arrogant enough to get sloppy somewhere. Roger's first discovery revolutionized our approach. Using financial intelligence contacts from his law enforcement days, he identified offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands connected to both Catherine and James. These accounts received wire transfers totaling $3 million in the 6 months before your father's death, he explained, showing me the documentation. The money originated from a shell company that, when we trace it back through several layers, connects to your father's business. This was embezzlement on a massive scale and provided a motive for changing the will. If Dad had discovered this theft, as his notebook suggested, James and possibly Catherine faced not just disinheritance, but potential criminal charges. Meanwhile, I focused on decoding Dad's notebook. The shorthand remained challenging, but with Barbara's help interpreting his business abbreviations, we established a timeline of Dad's growing suspicions, documented meetings, and attempts to gather evidence. The notebook mentioned recordings and backup docs at J.A. office, likely referring to Jeffrey Adams. When confronted with this information, Jeffrey admitted Dad had left a sealed envelope in his possession. He said it was insurance, only to be opened if something happened to him. After I was dismissed, I tried calling to arrange returning it, but he never responded. I still have it in my safe. The sealed envelope contained copies of financial documents showing systematic embezzlement from the company through fraudulent vendor contracts, all approved by James. Also included was a flash drive with recordings Dad had made of confrontations with James, where my brother admitted taking the money but blamed gambling debts and investment losses. The most damning recording captured Catherine berating James for getting caught and discussing how they needed to control the situation before Dad could change the will and company structure. Though not explicitly mentioning harming Dad, the conversation included Catherine saying, "We need time. A few weeks, that's all. Then it won't matter what he knows." With this evidence, we tracked down Linda Evans, the nurse who had cared for Dad in the hospital and had been suddenly transferred to another facility after his death. Initially reluctant to speak, Linda eventually confirmed she had documented concerns about visitors administering unauthorized substances to Dad's fore. But her notes had mysteriously disappeared from the medical record. "I raised the issue with Dr. Patel," she recalled. "He assured me he'd look into it, but instead I was reassigned the next day. When I insisted on filing an incident report, I was transferred out completely." Our case strengthened daily. A handwriting expert confirmed the signature on the will showed signs consistent with forgery or signature under duress. We located a partial draft of Dad's original updated will in Jeffrey's archives, which showed his intent to remove James from company leadership while still providing him financial support through a controlled trust, maintaining my equal share of the inheritance. In a stroke of investigative brilliance, Roger tracked down Maurice Baker, a disbarred attorney who had drafted the fraudulent will. Facing his own legal troubles, Maurice was willing to testify that Catherine had hired him directly, provided specific instructions about the will's contents, and brought in a visibly medicated Robert Parker to sign it. "The man could barely hold the pen," Maurice admitted. "I knew something wasn't right, but they had photographs of me with escorts from a service I'd used. They promised to send them to my wife if I didn't cooperate." James proved to be the weak link in their united front. After a night of drinking at his country club, he approached a mutual friend of ours, unaware the friend was now helping me. Intoxicated and boastful, James revealed damaging details about Catherine's plan to take control before Dad gave everything away to his pet charities and ungrateful daughter. He admitted they'd been adjusting Dad's medication to make him more compliant. With our evidence mounting, Catherine's boyfriend Martin became another unexpected asset. A man with a criminal background in insurance fraud, Martin had helped Catherine orchestrate parts of their plan. When Roger approached him with proof linking him to the conspiracy, Martin quickly offered to provide information in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Catherine orchestrated everything he revealed in a recorded statement. She found out Robert was planning to restructure his will and company leadership after discovering James's embezzlement. She couldn't allow that she needed both the company money and inheritance to cover her gambling debts and maintain her lifestyle. Martin confirmed they had manipulated Dad's medication, making him appear cognitively impaired to justify the sudden will changes. He also admitted to breaking into my hotel room on Catherine's orders to recover the notebook and evidence I'd gathered. The final piece fell into place when we located William Foster, Dad's lifelong friend, who was named as a witness on the fraudulent will, but whose signature appeared forged. "I was in Bermuda that entire week," William confirmed, providing passport stamps and hotel receipts, proving he couldn't have been present for the will signing. "I would never have witnessed a document disinheriting you, Allison. Your father often told me how proud he was of your independence and integrity." With this comprehensive body of evidence, Melissa advised it was time to return to court. "We now have documented financial crimes, witness tampering, medical manipulation, and clear forgery," she summarized. "We're not just contesting a will anymore, we're exposing a criminal conspiracy." For the first time in this grueling battle, I felt the tide turning decisively in our favor. Catherine and James had overplayed their hand, thinking their power and connections would make them untouchable. Instead, their elaborate scheme was unraveling thread by thread. With our case gathering momentum, Roger suggested bringing in a forensic accountant to analyze the company's financial records. Though we still lacked court-ordered access to the current books, we had historical data from Thomas Wilson and Barbara, plus the documents Dad had secured before his death. Lena Michaels, a forensic accountant with FBI experience, took just 2 weeks to uncover the full extent of the embezzlement scheme. They created a sophisticated network of shell companies that appeared to be legitimate vendors and consultants, she explained, walking us through flowcharts showing the money movement. Over 3 years, they siphoned approximately $4.6 million from the company. The scheme's sophistication suggested professional help beyond James's capabilities. Lena identified Martin Catherine's boyfriend as the likely architect. These structures match his methodology in previous fraud cases, she noted, showing comparisons to Martin's past financial crimes. Meanwhile, Linda Evans' dad's former nurse took an enormous professional risk by copying his complete medical records before they could be further altered. These records revealed alarming discrepancies. Your father's medication was changed 7 times in his final month, highly unusual for a stable patient, Linda explained. The new prescriptions would cause confusion, memory issues, and blood pressure fluctuations. Combined with his existing medication, they created a dangerous cocktail that essentially manufactured symptoms of cognitive decline and set the stage for a stroke. When I asked who had authorized these changes, Linda pointed to signature lines showing Dr. Patel had prescribed them often after consultations with Catherine, who had been granted medical proxy through documents signed during Dad's confused periods. This is textbook medical manipulation, Roger commented, reviewing the records. They created symptoms, then used those symptoms to justify taking control of his decision-making. The missing original will become our next target. Roger's theory that it might still be in the family home led to a breakthrough. Using her connections with the household staff, Samantha learned Catherine had recently installed a new safe in her bedroom closet, unusual since the house already had a substantial built-in safe in Dad's office. Through legitimate channels, we obtained the construction permit for the new safe installation. The timing was telling. Just 2 weeks after Dad's death, the same week the safe deposit box had been emptied. We couldn't legally search the home, but Roger suggested an alternative approach. The original will would have Dad's genuine signature witnessed and notarized. If we can find the notary, the will had been notarized by a junior employee at Dad's company, Rebecca Torres. When approached, Rebecca was initially reluctant to speak, but faced with potential accessory charges, she revealed Catherine had pressured her to backdate the notarization. Mrs. Parker said it was just fixing a technical oversight, Rebecca explained nervously. That Mr. Parker had signed everything properly earlier, but they'd forgotten the notarization. I knew it was wrong, but she implied my job depended on it. Most surprisingly, Rebecca admitted to making a photocopy of the original documents before returning them to Catherine. Something felt off about the whole situation. I kept copies as protection. These copies clearly showed subtle differences in Dad's signature, compared to the contested will supporting our forgery claims. The recording device mentioned in Dad's notebook proved harder to locate. We knew from his entries he had been secretly recording meetings with James and Catherine in the weeks before his death, but the device wasn't among his personal effects. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While helping Thomas Wilson clean out his office during a company headquarters renovation, Barbara discovered a small voice-activated recorder hidden in an air vent. The device, which matched one Dad had purchased according to his credit card statements, contained explosive conversations. In one recording, James tearfully confessed to embezzling company funds, but claimed Catherine had masterminded the scheme. In another, Catherine coldly discussed how they needed to accelerate the timeline because Dad was asking too many questions about the books. Most damning was a conversation 3 days before Dad's stroke, where Catherine instructed James to double the evening dose of Dad's medication before an important meeting with his lawyers. He needs to appear confused, she said. The doctor says this dosage will make him foggy but not dangerous. Once the new will is signed, we can go back to normal. While gathering evidence about the fraudulent will, we discovered Daniel Hoffman, the attorney who had prepared it, had been classmates with James in college and had received a $100,000 consulting fee the week after the will was executed. When confronted with bank records showing this payment, Daniel initially denied involvement beyond standard legal services. However, when presented with Maurice Baker's testimony and evidence of his connection to James, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency from the Bar Association. James approached me about creating a new will quickly, Daniel admitted. He said his father was declining rapidly and wanted to make changes before it was too late. I was told the family's regular attorney was unavailable. Daniel confirmed Catherine had provided specific instructions about the will's contents and had been present during the signing, contradicting her previous testimony that she had no involvement in its preparation. The most surprising evidence came from Catherine's personal assistant Megan, who contacted us voluntarily after overhearing Catherine and Martin discussing ways to discredit me further. They were talking about planting drugs in your hotel room and calling in an anonymous tip, Megan revealed. That's when I realized this had gone too far. Megan provided copies of Catherine's personal calendar showing meetings with Dr. Patel before he became Dad's doctor, proving their relationship predated his medical care. She also confirmed Catherine had coached the housekeeper and other staff on what to say in their affidavits about my behavior. Mrs. Parker wrote out their statements and told them it was just legal formality to sign them. Most didn't even read what they were signing. With this comprehensive body of evidence, Melissa filed an amended complaint detailing not just the will fraud, but the larger conspiracy of financial crimes, medical manipulation, and obstruction of justice. The filing included a motion for immediate injunctive relief to freeze the estate assets and company accounts pending resolution. They know we're closing in, Melissa warned, as we prepared for court. This is when they'll be most dangerous. They have everything to lose now. Her warning proved prescient. The night before our hearing, Catherine made a desperate move. Martin was caught attempting to break into Melissa's office. When apprehended by security, he had lockpicking tools and a flash drive containing malware designed to corrupt computer files. Under police questioning, Martin admitted Catherine had instructed him to destroy evidence related to our case. His arrest and subsequent cooperation with authorities delivered the final blow to Catherine and James's unified defense. With overwhelming evidence and Martin now turning state's evidence, we entered the courtroom the next day in the strongest position since beginning this fight. As I walked in, I caught Catherine's eye. For the first time, I saw something I'd never witnessed in my formidable mother fear. The amended complaint transformed the case from a simple will contest into a comprehensive civil action alleging conspiracy fraud, financial elder abuse, and medical manipulation. Melissa requested the case be assigned to a different judge, given the evidence suggesting Catherine had leveraged social connections to influence the previous rulings. The administrative judge reviewing our evidence of potential judicial bias agreed. Our case was reassigned to Judge Eleanor Martinez, known for her strict adherence to procedural justice and intolerance for legal games. Catherine and James, recognizing their deteriorating position, attempted damage control. Their attorneys contacted Melissa with a settlement offer $3 million for me, a mutual non-disclosure agreement, and dropping all claims. They're desperate, Melissa observed. But this isn't just about money anymore. She was right. The settlement included a gag order that would prevent the truth about Dad's treatment from ever becoming public. It would allow Catherine and James to paint me as a greedy daughter who extracted money from the grieving family. Most importantly, it would let them escape accountability for what they'd done to Dad. No deal, I said firmly. I want the truth on record. Their next maneuver was more aggressive. The prestigious Harrington firm withdrew as counsel, likely distancing themselves from the increasingly toxic case, and Catherine hired Stuart Reynolds, a notorious litigation attorney known for scorched earth tactics. Reynolds immediately filed motions to suppress nearly all our evidence, claiming violations of privacy, illegally obtained records, and hearsay. Judge Martinez scheduled a pretrial hearing to address these issues, giving us 2 weeks to prepare our responses. During this preparation period, the first cracks in the mother-son alliance appeared. James, facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement and medical tampering, approached Melissa through a separate attorney. He's offering complete testimony against Catherine in exchange for immunity from prosecution and a structured settlement from the estate, Melissa explained after the meeting. He claims Catherine masterminded everything and he was just following her instructions out of fear. The offer was tempting. James's testimony would be powerful, but I couldn't stomach the idea of him walking away unscathed after what he'd done to Dad. Tell him we'll consider reduced claims against him in exchange for his testimony, but complete immunity isn't on the table, I decided. He needs to face some consequences. James rejected this counteroffer, choosing to remain aligned with Catherine, at least publicly. But Reynolds' legal filings suggested internal conflict. Their defenses were increasingly contradictory with Catherine's arguments, sometimes implicitly blaming James for decisions he couldn't have made without her authority. The pre-trial hearing became a pivotal moment. Reynolds argued aggressively that our evidence had been obtained through improper methods and should be excluded. Melissa systematically refuted each claim, demonstrating the legal chain of custody for every document and testimony. Judge Martinez's rulings largely favored our position. The court finds that while some investigative methods pushed ethical boundaries, they remained within legal limits, she stated. Given the evidence of active obstruction and witness tampering by the defendants, the court will allow this evidence with appropriate limitations. With most of our evidence deemed admissible, Reynolds made a final attempt to avoid trial, a revised settlement offer of $5 million, no gag order, but with no admission of wrongdoing. I was tempted. The money would more than restore my inheritance. The absence of a gag order would allow me to tell Dad's story, and after nearly a year of fighting, I was exhausted. "What do you think, Melissa?" I asked. She considered carefully before answering. "It's a reasonable offer financially. But without an admission of wrongdoing, they'll spin this as a nuisance settlement. The court record won't reflect what really happened." She was right again. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore, it was about justice for Dad. After everything Catherine and James had done, they needed to face real consequences, not just financial penalties they could easily afford. No deal, I decided. We're going to trial. The night before trial, Catherine made one final desperate attempt to undermine our case. A flash drive was delivered to local media containing doctored photos and fabricated text messages designed to portray me as unstable and money-motivated. Fortunately, the metadata clearly showed recent manipulation, and most reputable outlets declined to publish the materials. That night in my hotel room, I spread our evidence across the bed, reviewing everything one last time. The weight of what I was about to do, publicly expose my mother and brother's crimes, hit me hard. Despite everything they'd done, they were still the only family I had left. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was this really what Dad would have wanted? To see his family destroyed in public? But then I remembered his notebook entries, his desperate attempts to document the truth before his death. He hadn't wanted this ugliness either, but he had valued truth and justice above all. "I'm doing this for you, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "They don't get to erase you and what you stood for." With that resolution, I gathered the documents back into their folders and prepared for the courtroom battle ahead. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Financial crime cases rarely generate public interest, but the combination of a wealthy family's suspicious death and dramatic allegations had attracted media attention. Catherine arrived impeccably dressed in conservative black, playing the role of grieving widow perfectly. James looked nervous but composed in an expensive suit. Opening statements set the tone for what would follow. Reynolds portrayed me as a resentful daughter who had abandoned my family for career ambitions, then returned demanding money when Dad died. He painted Catherine as a devoted wife, blindsided by false accusations during her period of grief. Melissa's opening was surgical and devastating. "This case isn't about a daughter's greed," she began. "It's about a calculated conspiracy to steal a man's legacy, manipulate his health, and ultimately contribute to his death for financial gain. The evidence will show that Catherine and James Parker engaged in a systematic plan to embezzle from Robert Parker's company, then altered his medication to make him appear cognitively impaired so they could force through a fraudulent will. When Robert Parker began uncovering their scheme, they increased his medication to dangerous levels, resulting in the stroke that killed him." The courtroom fell silent at these blunt allegations. Catherine's face remained impassive, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly. My testimony came first. For 6 hours over 2 days, I detailed my relationship with Dad, the suspicious circumstances after his death, and my investigation. Reynolds' cross-examination was brutal, suggesting I had fabricated evidence out of jealousy and greed. But I remained composed, answering each accusation with documented facts. James took the stand next, maintaining Catherine's narrative that Dad had been disappointed in me and had changed his will voluntarily. But under Melissa's cross-examination, he began to unravel. When confronted with the recorded conversation where he admitted to embezzlement, his facade cracked. "Mom said it would be okay," he blurted, eyes darting to Catherine. "She said Dad would never press charges against family, that we just needed to control the situation until..." "Until what?" Mr. Parker Melissa pressed. "Until the new will was signed," he finished quietly. Catherine's attorney immediately called for a recess, but the damage was done. During the break, Reynolds approached with yet another settlement offer, now with an admission of wrongdoing by James, but maintaining Catherine's innocence. "No," I said firmly. "All or nothing." As Catherine took the stand the following day, her usual confidence seemed diminished. She maintained her story of Dad's disappointment in me and voluntary changes to his will, but struggled to explain the documented meetings with Dr. Patel before he became Dad's physician. The turning point came when Melissa presented our final piece of evidence, the sealed envelope Jeffrey Adams had been holding. Inside was a video, recording Dad had made just 3 weeks before his death, during a period when Catherine believed him to be heavily medicated. In the video, a tired but lucid Robert Parker looked directly at the camera. "If you're seeing this, something has happened to me before I could address the situation with James and Catherine." He detailed discovering the embezzlement scheme, Catherine's attempts to isolate him from advisors, and his suspicions about his medication. "I'm recording this because I don't trust what might happen. Allie, if you're watching this, know that I was proud of you until the end. The changes they're pushing me to make to my will do not reflect my wishes. You deserve your birthright, and James needs accountability, not enabling." The video continued with Dad outlining his actual wishes for his estate, essentially the same as his previous will, with additional provisions to address the embezzlement through structured repayment rather than criminal charges. The courtroom was silent when the video ended. Catherine sat stone-faced while James had his head in his hands. Judge Martinez called an immediate recess, during which Reynolds approached with a white flag. Full admission of wrongdoing, restoration of the original will, plus punitive damages and legal fees, he offered quietly. "Miss Parker will also accept referral to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." Melissa looked at me questioningly. "Accept," I said, emotionally drained but satisfied. It's what Dad would have wanted, justice without unnecessary cruelty. The settlement was announced that afternoon. The judge formally invalidated the fraudulent will and reinstated Dad's previous estate plan with adjustments reflecting his recorded wishes. I received my original inheritance plus $1 million in punitive damages and full reimbursement of legal expenses. More importantly, Catherine and James were required to make full admissions of their actions on the court record. The judge referred the case to the district attorney, who later filed charges of financial elder abuse, fraud, and reckless endangerment against both of them. The aftermath was both vindicating and painful. James ultimately accepted a plea deal, serving 18 months in prison, followed by 5 years of probation and community service. Catherine fought the charges but was eventually convicted of multiple felonies. Her sentence, 4 years in state prison, reflected the seriousness of her orchestrated betrayal. The family business was placed under professional management with oversight from the board, with provisions for James to earn back limited involvement after completing his sentence and addiction treatment. Part of the settlement required both Catherine and James to undergo psychological evaluation and treatment. For me, the emotional healing took longer than the legal proceedings. Winning justice for Dad brought closure, but also finalized the loss of the family I had known. I established the Robert Parker Foundation for Elder Justice, with a portion of my inheritance funding both advocacy and direct support for victims of elder abuse and fraud. As part of my own healing process, I began speaking publicly about financial elder abuse, helping others recognize warning signs I had initially missed. The foundation eventually partnered with medical and financial institutions to develop better protective protocols and training. On the 1-year anniversary of the court decision, I visited Dad's grave alone. The elaborate mausoleum Catherine had commissioned had been replaced at my request with a simple granite headstone Dad would have preferred. "We got there, Dad," I said, placing fresh flowers beside his name. Not exactly how either of us would have wanted, but the truth came out. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since his death. The inheritance was substantial, but the real legacy Dad left me was far more valuable, the understanding that truth and integrity matter more than money or appearances. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood, but by the people who stand beside you when facing impossible choices. As I turned to leave, I noticed an elderly couple placing flowers at a nearby grave. The woman caught my eye and smiled gently, a stranger's kindness that somehow felt like a benediction. In that moment, I knew Dad would be proud not just of the justice I'd secured, but of the person I'd become through fighting for it. So, what would you do if faced with betrayal by those closest to you? Would you fight for justice no matter the cost or choose peace over truth? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others facing similar battles know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes walking into that courtroom is just the beginning of finding your own justice.